We saw that as e-commerce was emerging, and of course Amazon was one of the early movers, that it was all about data. And so we thought that we could apply what we'd learned in fintech to the e-commerce world.
Welcome everyone to UpTech Report, our Applied Tech series. Today's UpTech Report is sponsored by TerraLeap. Learn how to leverage the power of video at terraleap.io. Today I'm very excited for our guest, Simon Yencken, based in Palo Alto, California, and he is the CEO of Fanplayr. Welcome, Simon.
Thanks, Alexander. It's a pleasure to join you, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Now, your product, as I looked at your site, is a behavioral personalization for websites and e-commerce. So for those out there who are a CMO, a VP of marketing, or other business leader in the e-commerce space, and you want to know more about those customers and visitors on your site, this could be a tool you want to check out. Now, on your site, I noticed it states Fanplayr helps e-commerce retailers convert browsers into buyers with real-time offers and messaging, responding dynamically to shopping behavior. Now, I'm curious, Simon, how did you discover the problem? What was that problem you initially found when you decided, hey, I want to start this company? And how has that evolved over the years?
So, in a way, I think we've had an interesting journey as a startup. And we originally got together about 10 years ago. The three founders were all actually from a financial services tech or fintech background. And what we saw that in the fintech world, as that technology evolved, it was originally around data feeds into bank dealing rooms, fast ability to trade fast with large amounts of data, algorithms, analytics, trading systems. And we saw that as e-commerce was emerging, and of course Amazon was one of the early movers, that it was all about data. And so we thought that we could apply what we'd learned in fintech to the e-commerce world. That's how we got started.
That knowledge then led you to this. And now I can imagine there's a lot of history and an exciting story behind that. And for those that are interested, stick around for part 2, where we'll be diving into Simon's story. But to give us a taste of it, 7 years ago you started, 2013. What's one thing you wish you had known 7 years ago when you had started this?
If a founder of a startup hasn't reached a point in their journey where they wished that they knew how difficult it was before they started, then, I think you're not a true founder, because we all go through pivots, bridging difficult problems, whether it's on the customer side, the product side, staff, or financing. And I've worked in many different startups, large companies, large tech companies, and seen startups go from a pure startup right through to an IPO and then an acquisition. And one recently, Aconex, where I was involved, from the very first financing right through to sale to Oracle a couple of years ago. That was a great example of a pretty exciting journey where you start small, grow a company, grow it globally. I joined the board. I was on the board for 10 years and 3 years chairman, and go through the journey from a product standpoint, from a growth of the company standpoint, ultimately going public and then being acquired. And with Fanplayr, we are certainly on, I think, quite a similar journey. And, with many startups, it's always a question of, can you find product market fit, and getting the product right, getting the pricing and packaging right, getting your customers, and then achieving growth. And at the same time as you're doing that, trying to also spend a lot of time on working with investors, because without your funding, then you can't continue. So it's
A lot
it's
to
always an
balance.
it's always an exciting and all-consuming journey.
Well, I'm excited to hear more of that and your insights in our second part of our interview. Coming back to Fanplayr, curious if you could take us through a typical life cycle of a customer, a client of yours that uses the platform.
Yes.
Walk me through, how is it best used?
So that's a very good question, and I think I'm going to answer initially by talking about how we started. So we started focusing on retail e-commerce, and that was kind of the most obvious thing, because you're selling fashion or you're selling bags or selling a product online. And how can you do that more efficiently? It's pretty widely known that industry conversion rates are about 2 or 3%. How can you increase that? How can you increase revenue? And what we actually found is that clients actually approached us from other verticals. So we now support travel, including airlines, railways, cruise companies, hotels, resorts, telcos. So people that are selling like a mobile phone plan or home internet, car companies. So companies like Lexus, General Motors, Fiat Chrysler. Who would think when you started the company that you'd be working for a car company? I mean, who thinks about online for buying a car? Uh, we now work with gaming companies, entertainment and streaming companies, tech companies like Samsung, banks, energy utilities, insurance, and even B2B. We have a very large B2B account in Japan where they deal with their customers purely online and have like a $2 billion a year business. So who would have thought, starting out focusing on retail, selling bags or sweaters online, you could end up serving so many different verticals. So with each vertical, people approach it slightly differently, because if you imagine if you're an airline, you're trying to fill flights that are not full. You're trying to concentrate on routes where you typically have a lower conversion rate. You're also trying to look at user behavior. What does that tell you about people's intention? And like if you're a telco, you're trying to get more people to sign up to one of your mobile phone plans. If you're a bank, you can't create a new account online. It breaches, you have to comply with know your customer rules. So the best you can do is get people to go into a branch to actually make an appointment and turn up and sit in front of somebody in a branch. So because what amounts to a conversion is different in different industries, we work in the same way, but ultimately what is a conversion leads to a slightly different solution. So with a fashion retailer, they will very often be focused on increasing their revenue, the conversion rate, the average order value. But in recent times, people also want to focus on really personalizing the journey. So how can you actually provide a recommendation for somebody that's looking at a sweater? Is there a pair of jeans that goes with that sweater? And what sort of things go together? So we actually have extended into using AI to provide more intelligent and better recommendations for our customers.
I feel like the consumer is almost expecting that level of customization, and when they don't get it, they're like left wanting. I don't know if you agree with that statement.
I do, and I think that Amazon does such a great job that we all expect when we go to somebody other than Amazon, we'll get the same level of personalization and service. And actually, it's quite rare because they're really good at what they do. So It was interesting. I actually gave a lecture yesterday to the Whitman School of Business at Syracuse University. And one of the questions was, well, it's one of the MBA students. Wouldn't you agree that AI is the panacea, and isn't that an easy solution to everything about personalization? And of course, you have to agree with that, but actually implementing that and providing something that works is actually quite difficult. So I think, the answer to your question is yes, of course. We all would expect a better, more intelligent, personalized solution. Everyone talks about AI. Why doesn't everybody do it? But it's actually quite hard to do.
Speaking of the difficulty of making AI work well, what can you share about your technology, the platform itself, that makes it stand out, is different from other options out there?
Again, a really interesting question, because there are many companies competing in the e-commerce tech or marketing tech space. And people, especially in the US, have difficulty differentiating. But essentially, Fanplayr is a data platform. And so we start by collecting very granular data about user activity. And surprisingly, that data is something that typically is not collected. So even if you pick like a very large company, any of the large, I could, name, large telcos that we work with, like Vodafone or TIM, which is a large mobile carrier, or car companies like Fiat Chrysler, General Motors. You would think, they're very large companies. Surely a startup like Fanplayr doesn't know more about their data than they do. But actually, they don't collect the data that we collect, because what we do is, when you go to a site, every element of your journey we capture. So you're logging in. Where did you come from? Did you come from Google? Did you come from an email newsletter? Did you come from a retargeting ad? Have you been here before? How many times? What did you buy last time? What sort of products do you like? Where do you live? There are literally thousands of data points for every visitor every time they go to a site. And for our large customers, there are millions and millions of visitors. So by capturing all that data, storing it, and then making it available for query and for optimizing a visit, providing the most personalized visit to every person that goes to one of our clients' sites, really, that's the secret. And if you would say, well, can you tell me any more information? We have within our solution, I think, undoubtedly the leading segmentation engine in the industry. And you might say, well, I've heard of that term, so what does it mean? And essentially, it's an engine where you can use that to, and using machine learning and AI to actually divide up the users that are on the site, all driven by their behavior. What does their behavior tell you about their intentions? Divide it up into many, many different categories, and people fall into a segment. And they may fall into multiple segments. So really, we have a segmentation engine that is best in class. It's easy to configure, comes with hundreds of pre-existing rule sets. And if, like this happened when we first added an airline as a customer, and they said, we don't care about what's in your shopping cart. We don't have a shopping cart. We care about routes, number of passengers, what class are they traveling, where are they going to, what's the departure city. So those attributes are completely different than if you're selling clothing online. So with our segmentation engine, we developed a way of easily adding custom rule sets. So if you come in and you say, actually, we're a car company, we care about these things, or we're a party supply company, we care about Halloween and the Super Bowl, lots of things like that that aren't relevant necessarily if you're selling fashion. So one of the things is the segmentation engine is best in class, easily to configure and add custom rule sets. And we also provide it as a service to any other application. So that means that people can use the Fanplayr segmentation engine to drive a third-party application or a third-party service not connected with Fanplayr. And we realized it was unique when we were discussing it with our patent attorney, and they said, we think that's patentable. And sure enough, we have patents pending for that all around the world. So,
can you give me an example of one of the integrations that you have that the segmentation engine works with?
yes, so things like, for example, you could imagine many sites have a chat service. And usually you see that when you go to the site, there's a bubble on the side of the site, and it can be like an annoying widget, or maybe it'll pop up automatically. Hey, I'm Dave. How can I help you with today? And you go, close. How can I stop this annoying widget? So what Fanplayr can do is work out based on behavior when in the shopping journey or when in the visit does somebody really need help, and what do they need help with? So you can actually bring up something in context that really relates to what they're actually interested in doing. Then, we can do that even though we're not actually providing the chat service. Or, one of our airline customers, Alitalia, who I think is the biggest airline in Italy and very big in Europe, they actually said to us, look, we use Adobe Target to create macro segmentation of audiences. So they know, being with Adobe, have a very large amount of data. But they said, we can't do anything with that. We'd like to use Fanplayr in real time, obviously, to use the Adobe segments and then to target people based on Adobe's segmentation. So it's the ability to work with other tech companies, other third-party systems, where that's really our philosophy, to be open APIs, work with any company, try and add value. We're not trying to be like a closed garden or a closed universe, but rather being open and helping other technologies and systems.
I feel like in today's world where there are so many more SaaS platforms and options and technologies that are rising, integration is paramount to be effective. Now, for your platform, can you share your business model? Is it a yearly, monthly cost by seat? Well, how does that work?
It's a monthly cost based on the size of the site. And then because we now have a menu of different services, then we charge extra according to what the client is choosing from the menu. So like the base service, which is what we started with, which is segmentation, analytics, and on-site targeting, that would be like the base service. And then recent add-ons we have include the streaming service, which we use for streaming to email service providers. That would be an extra, where Fanplayr provides the logic for triggering and the content, smart content for email campaigns. Another add-on is product recommendations. So it's an AI service where we use Google AI to provide on-site product recommendations using 4 common algorithms, products you may like, frequently bought together, and so on.
Helping to be like that Amazon experience, but ideally
Exactly.
even better.
So that's extra. And then we would charge extra for push notifications. And we've recently, we're actually just about to launch personalized SMS messaging, where if you're going to a site, people are used to being asked for your email address. But now, because more and more people are really entirely on a smartphone, and certainly in some countries in Asia, many people don't have a computer. It's just a smartphone. So what has been found is that SMS messaging has much higher open rate and higher click-through rate than emails. So we've launched a new service for personalized SMS messaging.
What's the typical size that you find are often working with you? Like is it mostly enterprise size companies, or what would be the best?
Yeah, it's mostly enterprise. We originally, when we started with small SMBs, but what we found, because the service is very data centric, that the more data you have, the more insights, the better, more personalized service you can provide.
For VP of marketing or CMO of in these situations, are there any insights or tips that that come to mind, whether it's related to your product or not, just in this space of in today's world of having to personalize the market to each consumer? Any insights you want to share?
Yes, I think historically, when people think about personalization, most people have understood that to be personalization based on demographics, meaning that a lot of effort was made to identify people individually and then make assumptions about what those individuals would like or not like and try to personalize the site accordingly. And first of all, that's a lot of work, because essentially, if you pick a demographic, maybe female, age 20, 30, living in San Francisco Bay Area, and you can add other demographic factors as well, you can imagine how difficult it is to essentially re-engineer a site all based on demographics. Are we personalizing for male, female, what age group, and then re-engineering the site for those different experiences? First of all, it's a lot of work. Typically, those projects were at least 18 months or more in duration, very expensive. But what we actually found is it doesn't work terribly well. And we typically say, well, we've done well, we've delivered an uplift of 2 to 4% increased performance, whereas our objective has always been to make an increase in performance of about 10 times that. And so what I would say to CMOs, VPs of e-commerce, that yes, personalization is important, but the new world is heavily focused on privacy, and it's heavily focused on hiding personal information, whether it's GDPR, the new Californian privacy rules, ITP, which, the new protocols against tracking of users across sites. It's becoming harder and harder to actually identify individuals. And even if you did, the personalization you do based on demographics isn't that effective. So what we do is we look at behavior and we say, we don't need to know your identity. We'll look at your behavior and see what that behavior tells us about your intentions. How can we help you? Why are you there? How can we provide a better experience? What did other people that are behaving in a similar way do or want? And we use that to provide behavioral personalization. And it is much more effective. And when you talk about privacy, it doesn't matter if you don't know who the person is, because you can see what they want, why they're there, by their behavior.
You know, what makes me think about is an effective salesperson. If they're sitting down and talking to someone, they'd be asking these questions and they'd be seeking, okay, where are you going? What are you trying to do? And then they'd be felt they were heard and listened to, and then they responded to. And that salesperson doesn't need to know their background. Actually, be creepy if the salesperson suddenly knew who they were.
True.
So it's effectively your website is you're trying to do the same thing as an act as a good salesperson, understanding what their needs are before they need to ask it.
Exactly. And if you actually think about traditional retail and how important the physical layout of a store is, or even before that, the location, physical layout, your merchandising strategy, and then ultimately the really good retailers have the very best people in store to help you. And I know from my own experience, there's nothing more frustrating than going into a department store, you're looking for a pair of jeans, there's a lot of stock, but you just can't find what you're looking for, and you can't find anyone to help you.
It's so annoying.
And you end up walking out. So if you think about how much is invested in those sort of strategies in physical retail, and how in the post-COVID world, so much more of retail has actually moved online, surely you should work out, how can I provide the same level of service to people I don't know who are anonymous online? It's so important.
You should be investing the same amount of resources and energy so that people aren't coming through your digital store and saying, there's no one here to help me. I'm lost. I'm just leaving now.
Exactly.
Powerful. Well, what can you share on the roadmap of what's coming up for you? Where do you see the company in the next few years?
So on the product roadmap front, ultimately our goal is to use AI and data to provide the best possible experience that is unique to every person, irrespective of where they come from, any demographics, in the moment. So ultimately, that's the goal from a product standpoint. And from a company standpoint, we're aiming for an IPO. I'm an Australian and grew up in Australia, worked in London for 7 years before coming to Silicon Valley. And as a result of my background in Australia, have connections to a lot of Australian tech companies. So I've been on the board of quite a number of tech companies, and I was on the board of Razor Risk Technology, which was an ASX listed company, ASX being the Australian Stock Exchange. Aconex, on the board for 10 years, 3 years chairman. That was the one that we sold to Oracle 2 years ago for 1.2 billion US dollars. And in the US, I was on the board of Tibco Software leading up to their IPO in 1999. And I'm currently on the board of Damstra Technology, which is an Australian software as a service company, went public a year ago, and they specialize in services for typically, mainly mining construction companies for things like site access, safety, worker tracking, and education. So through that experience and the fact that the ASX is marketing itself as an alternative to a late stage funding for US companies. We have a strategy of actually going public in the ASX in a couple of years' time. And, we're all we're working hard towards that strategy to make it happen.
Well, Simon, I'm excited to hear the future, and can't wait for that to come into being. And I appreciate you breaking down both how it got started, the problem that you saw, the technology. It's very exciting to see how it's coming together, and potential use cases. For those that want to learn more, you can go to fanplayr.com. That's fanplay, the letter R.com. Thank you so much for your time, Simon.
Thank you, Alexander. It's a pleasure.
Again, this is for UpTech Report. This is our Applied Tech series. Stay tuned for part 2 of our discussion with Simon to hear more about his story and background, and we'll catch you guys next time. Have you seen a company using AI, machine learning, or other technology to transform the way we live, work, and do business? Go to uptechreport.com and let us know.